Hi, this is Dr. RoboCoach with the 2019 review of Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard, which is artificial intelligence, I guess you could call it, an assistant for helping you with your snake draft. So that's what you're looking at right now. I have a draft going with CBS Sports Line, and I'll switch over to that. You can see here's my draft room. And I am on the clock. I have the seventh pick in the draft. That's me, the cow. And Fantasy Pros has synced with uh, my draft room, and it's done it quite well. That's my first thing. I bought the Draft Wizard. It's on the expensive side. You know, I bought the Hall of Fame version, which was $100. I think the next tier down was $50. So maybe I bought too much, but in any event, it was very easy in that respect. But what beyond just purchasing and whether or not the thing works, what do you want to see in your artificial intelligence draft wizard helper? Well, you want to see the same things you saw in the cheat sheet. So, just briefly to recap, you want to see value-based scoring, value-based drafting techniques applied, customized scoring. You want to see whether or not the player is going to start hot or cold. You want to see tiers, not not that you don't want players who are really in the same tier to be differentiated as if one's better than the other. And so what else? You want to see, some other basic stuff like ADP and wait until pick, or WUP as I call it. You want to see any sort of injuries, and you want to see that all at a glance. So you don't want to have to click around to find that information out. So everything that's true for cheat sheets is also true for your draft assistant. Now, the draft assistant should be able to take all that information and intelligently suggest what your next pick should be. So if you trust the draft assistant, then you could say, well, I don't need to see that information as long as the draft assistant incorporates that into its decision. But you don't know, mostly because most of these um, AIs don't reveal what the algorithm is that's going on behind the scenes. So you can safely assume, though, what they show you here is going to be involved in the algorithm. And so when I came into the draft, the first thing it was showing me wasn't the top VBD players. It was the suggested players to consider. So that's probably, well, it's interesting. I don't know what that means though. And then you can change what the suggestions are based upon these other criteria, expert voting, strength of schedule, blah, blah, blah. So you don't really care about, most of these things. Suggested players to consider. The only thing you really want to consider, uh, and really the only thing that they should offer to you, but it's nice that they offer different things. The one that you want is value-based drafting. And so we're interested in the top VBD players. And so I'm not sure exactly what the difference is between top VBD players and suggested players to consider. But clearly it makes a difference because the ranking changes. James Conner disappears when I put it, James Conner appears when I put top VBD players. And if I players to consider, and then I get DeAndre Hopkins. So not really sure, but let's assume that the AI is deciding what this is, and if I put in what suggested players to consider is, so it's taking in more factors than if I had just um, chosen VBD. With VBD, it's going to be straight VBD. And that's fine with me because VBD is what it's all about. So the thing about VBD though is that it's not an exact number. These there uh, if somebody is a VBD score better of 100 better than a 91 and an 86, the answer is nobody can tell you. If it, what sort of sensitivity, I mean, they can tell you the calculations for these different things. These are different types of VBD, analytics, value over next available, value over last starter, value over replacement player. They're all sort of the same thing. So can it tell me, how accurate those numbers are? No, not really. Even if you talk to the programmer, they can tell you what the formula is, but is it accurate? Does it have, they don't know. So in that situation, they shouldn't present it like it's accurate. They should really just do the next best thing is to say, okay, let's cluster these players all together, and the clustering will bring out any sort of significance in the numbers. That's straight math. That has value. And then the clustering or the tiers, the groups will then have some sort of validity in that you'll see that some players are the same as others. James Conner, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, you might find are all in the same tier, and differentiating them by this VBD score, which separates, from 100 to 86, it may be an insignificant difference. So that's critical though, because if they're the same player, then you can wait on them. And so that's not being presented here. And again, that comes over from cheat sheets, and you want to see the same thing in your draft assistant in artificial intelligence as you see in your cheat sheet. So you can, that I would say with Fantasy Pros, that's a mistake to present that as some sort of valid difference. Um, and not to pick on Fantasy Pros because almost I can't think of any site that does that. Um, they all make that mistake, and their numbers just aren't that accurate. To present them that way is misleading. Um, so can't really hold that against Fantasy Pros when everybody else does it too. So in any event, so what do you, above the cheat sheet, what do you want to see now? Well, you want to see, if this is artificial intelligence, then it should be able to tell you what your whole draft is going to look like. So I want to see, if I've told, well, rather, Fantasy Pros synced, the DraftWizard synced with CBS, and it found out that my draft slot was seventh. And you can see that here. My overall pick is 7. And based upon that, I should have walked in here and it should have said, hey, um, you're in the 7th slot. And based upon that, with your league setup, this is a huge league. There are 16 players in the league. And so my next pick is, 7 plus whatever. I'll have the next pick at 22, and then I'll have, the next pick at 38 or something like that. Anyway, it can be calculated what is going to happen if I have those picks. Each player has a known ADP, with plus or minus of, a normal amount, that. So based upon those numbers alone, um, you can calculate this is what your team's going to look like if you're in the 7th slot of this league. And I'm not getting that. What I'm getting at is here I am at pick 7, and it's just sort of an ad hoc thing, and it's telling me, okay, well, no players, based upon where the draft is at now, you should take David Johnson. Well, that's not really intelligence. I get that already in the CBS draft room. If I switch over to the CBS draft room, then you'll see that it's giving me, up to date picks. It's like, okay, it's not David Johnson. They're suggesting DeAndre Hopkins, but still, I'm getting something there. The value add that the difference between what I'm getting in that draft room and what I'm getting in the draft assistant is probably uh, the fantasy point prediction. So here's the CBS Sportsline fantasy prediction. And is that VBD? I doubt it. And again, it doesn't tell me the what the basis of that fantasy prediction is. If it's VBD, I looked, couldn't find it. And so this is a value add there, but you can get this in cheat sheets, and by crossing off, you know you can track the VBD yourself. Not a huge artificial intelligence leap to say, oh, well, here's the next best VBD score available. Um, I can cross off a list. I wouldn't call that artificial intelligence to tell me to take the next VBD score. Um, so I'm looking for VBD. That's great, and it's probably a bump up from CBS Sports gives me. I'm looking for sync. That's great. Fantasy Pros is giving me, but so does CBS Sports. Um, so uh, so far, I'm not terribly impressed with the artificial intelligence here. What I'm looking for is something, like a simulation. It says, okay, if if give you an example. So I'm in the seventh slot of this draft, and basically after the first, um, here's the draft log. Again, it's nice to have, but it's already given to me in the draft room. So after Saquon, Kamara, McCaffrey, and Elliott, um, you know, there if one of those players fell to the seventh spot, then I would snatch him up. But after those four players, then there's a big drop. And you can see that somebody reached for Patrick Mahomes and Julio. I wouldn't call that a reach, but this is definitely a reach. And if one of these four players fell to the seventh spot, then I'd say, okay, maybe the seventh spot is a good place to draft from because I might catch one of those top players dropping. Zeke might drop, for example, because of his contract issues. Um, in any event, basically what I'm saying is I have no way to simulate if a player fell here. I just have to sort of go with the flow, and when the seventh pick comes around, um, I'll take who's ever highest on the VBD list according to the draft wizard. And then again, so that's not really intelligence. That's just a list and crossing people off a list. So what I'd like to see is a draft wizard that tells me when I walk in to the room, you're in the seventh slot, and here's all of your 13 picks that we see based upon you being in the seventh slot in this league. Um, so I'm not getting that here. And if they had, they probably would have said, okay, well, David Johnson will probably be available at the seventh slot. And, with your second pick, we see this other player, and then I can look and I can visualize the future. Um, so chances are I don't want the seventh slot, that I'd rather take a different slot because, if I don't get one of those top players, then everyone else is in a big lump after that. And I can trade down in my league to the 16th slot and I can get players, I can get two good players from that second group instead of, one good player from that second group behind the elites. Um, in any event, it's not giving me that sort of intelligence. I would call this pretty much just a live cheat sheet that syncs with Sportsline, that gives me VBD, which is, I mean, that's VBD is huge. No, no small feat there that they've synced it and they've given me VBD. But it's not giving me the simulation ability that I want. Um, it's not giving me the what if. ability that I want. I want to be able to, say, hey, mm, what would happen if I switched to the 13th pick in the draft? What would happen if I fit, what would be my total scoring output for that whole year if I switch to the 16th pick in the draft? Now that's intelligence, because now he's mapping out the AI is mapping out the whole draft. It's showing you that it understands the big picture, and then it's not just a glorified sheet crossing off and showing you the next best available. So it shouldn't be hard. It's simulation is easily done for developers. With an algorithm, it can be done, and it's not done. So um, hard to fault DraftWizard for that, because nobody does that. Um, but that's what you want. Just because nobody else does it doesn't mean you shouldn't want it. Um, that's not what you're getting though. So there's a lot of nice tools here. They've got a bunch of cheat sheets, and they track the draft board, and that's great. Um, but again, this is all available in the off-the-shelf draft room that you get from CBS Sportsline or Yahoo or NFL or any of those other draft rooms. So the big difference between what you're getting there and what you're getting here is the VBD. And I have to say one more thing about that VBD, is it's based upon this, which you can see it was based upon the PPR default system, which is not exactly a match with my league system. So it did bring in the roster positions, and it did bring in the number of teams. That's great. But you can see here the scoring is based upon a standard scoring system. It's not my scoring system. And it's close, but little differences matter. Um, Sometimes they matter a lot. And in this case, I'm a little disappointed. It could have brought in, like in my league, we offer bonuses for achieving milestones, 300 yards passing, 100 yards rushing or receiving. That's a pretty common thing to offer bonuses for reaching those levels, and that has a definite impact upon scoring. It bumps up a lot of players that are your more standard, um, get the ball a lot, key players, and that's not here. It's not an option. My choices, basically were PPR. Actually, it looked at my league scoring, I think, and tried to just see whether or not I offered PPR, and it put me in the default PPR. Not really intelligent. It should offer at least some bonuses, if not some exact sync with my scoring system, because there are other idiosyncrasies to my scoring system that will affect VBD and will affect scoring and predictions, and I'm just not getting that here. It's another thing. It's just, if you can do projections on PPR, then you can do projections on other idiosyncrasies like bonuses and really an infinite number of different setups. Um, Not hard to do, but it's not done here. But then again, nobody does it, so hard to fault Fantasy Pros for that, um, because they've offered at least a little bit of customization. So uh, in summary, this is what does this give me? Does it give me it gives me the things that um, the basic VBD and customization that I want. Um, that's sort of the without customized scoring predictions and VBD, then really you're already failing. So with those two things, um, this is a big jump ahead. And of course, sync is nice, but sync's got to offer me things that are above the draft room that I already get. So some things that it could offer me are um, hot and cold. So just tell me whether or not this player is hot or cold. I did see that if I click around, this strength of schedule sort of maybe tells me hot or cold. But again, I don't want to be clicking around. If I've got 30 seconds to draft, I don't want to be clicking around. I want to see right here on the front page whether that player is going to start hot or cold. So, and again, it doesn't offer me tiers. It presents this VBD score as if 1 point difference is that's real. That's a big difference. It's not. And anybody who presents it that way is only kidding themselves. And does give me ADPs, but I have to look around for it where it's somewhere in here. I have to click on these things. Um, and but then again, it's um, the intelligence is incorporating the ADP into its suggestion. So it doesn't really have to show me again these things, just so long as it's incorporated and I'm told that it's incorporated. So hot or cold doesn't appear to be incorporated, or at least they haven't told me it is. And tier is definitely not incorporated. Um, so injury information would be nice as well, but I'm not getting that. And then of course the big thing is you've got to present stuff to me that's above and beyond the draft room. I want simulation. I want intelligence. I want it to tell me, hey, you've got the overall seventh pick in the draft. Why don't you trade down to the 16th pick, because all the players after the top tier are basically the same, and you can pick up two players from the second tier with the 16th pick and then on the wrap at the 17th pick. Now that's intelligence. Um, so you would get that if it would simulate and present to you a simulation, what would happen if you were in different draft slots, but it's not doing that. Um, and it's not allowing you to do any sort of simulation. And by simulation, I don't mean, a mock draft. A mock draft is practice. Um, that's not intelligence. Having you do a lot of practices to see what happens isn't a simulation. That's wasting your time. You want it to simulate for you in the different slots without you having to spend hours and hours doing mock drafts against AI. So this wasn't hard, as I said. I just bought it. Opened up the draft room with CBS, and the sync happened. That was great. But then again, you got to give me a reason for coming here. It's got to be a value add over that draft room. So overall, I think I've been pretty hard on Fantasy Pros here, and that's only because I have higher expectations from them. They're one of the few sites that actually present some sort of customization and recognition that VBD is critical and that customization is critical. And so they're good in that sense. They were the only player that I ranked that their cheat sheet, their printable cheat sheet above a D, I think. So they're good, and they could be better. Um, And what they have to do is stop focusing on this stuff that you already like, the draft log, the position tracker, blah blah blah. Stop focusing on all it, presenting me all this stuff that I can get in the existing draft room, and start focusing more on this stuff in the middle here, the VBD and artificial intelligence stuff that I don't get from my draft room. Please like this down below. I'll give you a link to the article that inspired this. And this has been Dr. RoboCoach. I hope you have a great 2019 year.